to our latest episode of Voices in Leadership, the Leading Age Virginia podcast. I am Melissa Andrews, your host, President and CEO of Leading Age Virginia. And I am absolutely thrilled to have our guest on today, Melissa Pritchard from SFCS Architects, one of our incredibly important sponsors of Leading Age Virginia, who has been with us from the beginning. And Melissa, what I love about your firm is that you're Virginians. I mean, you are through and through Virginians. And so you understand so much about our members, and you're all over the state. You see our members, from one end to the other. And when we talk about what's happening in Virginia, just from policy perspectives, I mean, you feel it because you're a Virginian. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for all you do to support us. And
well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I mean, you know how much we value our relationship and all the work that you and your team do in supporting all the members and frankly, really what it's all about, all their residents.
Well, so I want to start with just how did you choose the profession that you're in? So many people that I interview on the provider side, it's always, a lot of it's by accident. It's not necessarily by design, unintended, and nice. We'll get to by design. Do you like that? I didn't understand that. So just talk to us kind of about your career trajectory. How did you get where you are?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting combination of sort of lifelong meant to be and probably a little bit of personal stubbornness in it. So I'll explain that.
Okay.
So some of the things that I think are foundational and really impactful for me throughout my life have been that I am the much younger child of much older parents. So as a very, very young child, I was acutely aware of aging because my parents were at least a decade older than all of my peers, all my friends' parents. And then that made my grandparents, at least a decade, if not more, older than their grandparents. And so it created a sensitivity and an awareness of aging in me from the very beginning. So that's sort of the aging services side of this, and being drawn to making a difference in the lives of older adults. Now, the architecture side of it is that one of the things that my parents did as part of their retirement planning actually was that they bought old rundown houses in different neighborhoods of the town or the city that I grew up in. And as a family, we spent most weekends rehabilitating those homes and then, creating a really nice environment and home that was also very affordable. And my parents would then rent those out. So they had, at times, probably at the maximum 12 or 15 rental properties that we had one by one rehabilitated. And then part of their retirement planning was to sell, a property off a year or every couple of years. So, as a little bitty kid, I spent most Saturdays and Sundays, being the gopher, the go-to. Can you bring me a hammer? Can you bring me, the Allen wrench or this or that? So I also grew up with a love of knowing what we could do to spaces and the impact that spaces have on people's lives. So coming to, sort of deciding what was I going to do with my life? And maybe this is the part of the accident. I had always been fascinated by buildings, but when we were going on college tours at University of Tennessee, where I ended up going to architecture school, When we were doing the tours, we talked to some people in the architecture program, and one of the admitting, counselors basically said to me, "Well, it's the toughest program on campus. Less than a third of students who apply for the program are admitted, and then only a third of those make it through their first year of architecture school." And so I was like, okay, well, that's for me. So I like a challenge, and I was really lucky. The school, and this is very different now. They looked at my grades and my test scores, and they admitted me on the spot. I didn't have to do a portfolio. I didn't have to do anything like is done now to be admitted into architecture school. So, almost 30 years later, here we sit.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think back to college and think, I don't know that I would get into my college now if I was applying, right?
I know. I
It's,
mean, it is impressive. Architecture schools, a lot of people don't really know how, one, competitive it is to get into school. And then two, once you even get through school, there's a huge attrition rate every year of people leaving, the major. And then the process afterwards that you have to go through in order to become licensed, and the number of tests you have to take, it's the equivalent or more of becoming a doctor. And it's a long and a hard path.
yeah, my niece is in her first year at University of Maryland, and architecture is, and I even said to her, I said, "You're crazy. Why did you apply to schools for architecture instead of just switching in?" But I think she might be an overachiever like you, and successful. But I want to add, I'm going to come back to your story, your personal story in a moment. And by the way, as an older parent, that really resonates to me, especially when my daughter says to me, Mom, it makes me sad when I look around at my friends and know that you're going to go before all their parents.
Oh, goodness. I mean, on one hand, I mean, that is the sensitivity that children, young children of older parents have. And it has a huge impact on your personality. I'd say the good thing about that, Melissa, is that she expresses that to you.
Yeah.
And you can have that conversation. It's not a weight and a fear that she carries with her that is unspoken. So I would encourage you to encourage her to continue that conversation with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll tell you offline what else she said. I want to talk about, because you mentioned the attrition rate and you mentioned, how competitive it is. I'm interested in, there are so many, obviously there are tons of firms out there, but the importance of a firm that really specializes and concentrates on working with aging services providers as opposed to schools and shopping centers, or, and how do you create that specialization? How do you become as good as you all are in this aging services space?
Well, it's interesting. The history of the firm, over 100 years ago, we started as a local general practice firm. And frankly, that's how most architecture firms start, is by general practice. And then over time, they develop an expertise and a specialty. And that's exactly what happened to our firm, to SFCS. About 30 years in, 40 years into the life of the firm, we began to do senior living projects. And at that time, what was Virginia Baptist Homes is now Lifespire. Again, a Virginia organization that has multiple communities. They were our first client, and
Wow.
that was back in the 1940s. And from there, we really not only fell in love, and of course, this was before me, but we fell in love with the practice and the impact that we could have on people's lives. And we started to do more and more and more of that work. And then, we transitioned from just doing the work to what I would say becoming thought leaders in the work. And that's one of the values and the benefits of being a specialist. And they're very different business models. As a generalist, a general practice, you practice different types of architecture. One of the things that I tell young people when we're recruiting is that when you tell them that we specialize in senior living, a lot of times you get a bit of a puzzled look at first. You're on a college campus, you're talking to 20-something-year-old, and you say, we specialize in senior living, and you kind of get a puzzled look. The point I make to young people is that you get to practice every type of architecture under a senior living specialty that you do under a general practice firm, but you get to do it with a bigger mission and with a bigger impact. And so, it's something that we strongly believe in. We believe, and frankly, I think it shows in our work and in our firm that the commitment and the passion and the years of experience and knowledge does set you apart from others.
Yeah, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking of LifeSpire and their multiple campuses. I've been to all of them, obviously, and how different each of them are. So now that you're saying that, the variety, creativity, like I'm thinking of Lakewood, which is just, I'm in
Right.
Glen Allen, right? Or the hybrid, that then, you think about the Colpack, like I'm thinking about each campus. I mean, in your profession, I mean, you're still doing high rises, you're doing, so speak to that. Like when you say that you get to practice all kinds of things as architects in senior living, what does that mean?
Well, what it means is, I mean, when you think about architecture, there's different kinds of buildings. And a lot of times people who are in general practice, they'll say, oh, well, we get to do residential architecture. We get to do retail architecture. We get to do restaurants, and sort of sell that as, oh, well, that's variety and that's exciting, and you're not ever going to get bored like you might with a specialty senior living firm. And the reality of it is, when you think about the types of communities that we're designing and working with, we literally get to practice almost every type of architecture that exists. We design restaurants, we design residential environments, we design healthcare environments, we design fitness and wellness spaces, natatoriums, outdoor
Worship centers.
Yeah, religious architecture and worship centers, event spaces. I mean, you get to practice so many different, not only types of architecture, but because we practice not only in Virginia, but all over the country, we also get the aesthetic, the design aesthetic. There's a lot of variety in that as well. So it's interesting. I went into architecture and senior living architecture very intentionally. I did my thesis project on aging services. I mean, so it was, for me, it was a very clear, straight path. But I almost discovered later that I hadn't lost anything in terms of being a practicing architecture. I had actually gained way more than I thought I would have, because there is so much variety, and the added value is that it's all focused on improving the lives of older adults. And to me, that's a higher calling in architecture, to do architecture that impacts people's lives positively and contributes to their lives. So as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about what we do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was with a group of CEOs this weekend, and we were just talking about, what's so unique about what we do, that intersection of healthcare and hospitality.
Mhm.
And I think that's what one of the things that you're describing, because, and we didn't even mention the healthcare aspect when you're looking at the continuum,
Right.
and right, healthcare without looking like healthcare. Uh,
Exactly.
and what a creative challenge
Mhm.
as we've looked at the past 3 decades, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's also different about when you are a specialty design firm, you have the knowledge to actually create the change that needs to occur in the field. You're
Mhm.
not following, you're leading. And that is one of the things that I would say was unexpected to me, that I didn't really anticipate until I joined SFCS about 18 years ago. I knew that I wanted to work for a specialty senior living design firm that was, nationally known. And that's what drove me to join the firm. What I didn't know at that time is that we would actually be leading and creating trends and doing, we were doing things that were so much more than buildings. We were actually creating the future of aging services and aging environments. And that's also a very different type of architectural practice. That's something that, for our team, it's what, we get up in the morning every day about, is the opportunity and the excitement to do something different.
Well, let's stick with that for a minute, and eventually we're going to come back to Melissa, the person. But let's stick with that. And I'm thinking about the work that we collaborated on with our middle market playbook.
Mhm,
And you all were instrumental in
mhm,
terms of saying, we can buy an old Marriott, a Courtyard Marriott for $1 million,
mhm,
and we can transform this into a rental offer for folks that are in that middle income demographic. And then we can bring this into, and we can offer services to them. And any listeners who want to get that playbook, just go to leadingagevirginia.org. But, I think, can you share, like, you're talking about creating the future, talk about specifically all the work that you all have led on with this middle market. And I've been having a lot of conversations recently. As I mentioned, I was just to you earlier, I was just on a panel on Capitol Hill that was sponsored by Genworth. And I talk about, Nick coined the term the forgotten middle.
mhm,
And somebody said to me yesterday, and it was really striking, that she thinks people don't want to talk about the middle because middle is a word that nobody really likes. Like when you
mhm,
talk about middle skilled worker, it kind of is
mhm.
referred to as that. So we need a different term than middle, but it is the biggest demographic of the
Right.
baby boom population. And yet not a lot of people are doing stuff for them. There's no financing for long-term services and supports. They have too much for a subsidy. They don't have enough for private
Mhm.
pay. So our
Exactly.
listeners know who we're talking about. So Melissa, if you could just talk about the work that you all have led on with regards to
Mhm.
that demographic.
Yeah, it was the timing of our involvement in your task force was really perfect for our firm. It was a mission and a special pursuit that had been started by my boss, Ty Campbell, the former CEO of our firm. And it was personal for him. One of the things he said is that I've spent my career designing environments that I won't be able to afford to live in, nor will my parents be able to. And as a personal, value, he felt like as a firm, we could have an impact there. We could help figure out this challenge. And so we had been doing research because we're a research based firm. And when there's a problem that our field is facing, even when it's not architecturally founded, it's not architecturally or environmentally based, the more we can dig in and research and understand about it, the more we feel like we're able to help our clients. Now, this particular initiative, the middle market focus, it did have a building component to it, although it's only one piece of the equation, and it's actually in a lot of cases, the most minor piece of the equation. There's so many other elements that you have to get right to make this work. So we had been working in it, you through your generosity asked us to be a part of it. That allowed us to actually, I would say, increase and raise the focus within our firm on supporting the middle market task force and the playbook, while also continuing our research and our exploration, which then has now continued. It's been well over a decade that has been a special initiative and special focus for our firm. And it's a subspecialty that we have developed. It's a subspecialty that we're doing board workshops, in states around the country, to help them understand, look, if this is something that you want to get into, these are all of the factors, the middle market equation that we developed, that you've got to think through, and you have to be prepared to tackle. You will not get there with only a focus on the sticks and the bricks, the architecture. There's so much more to actually getting there, but also emphasizing to those groups that we now get to speak to and share that knowledge with, that you can do this. There are examples, and here are the examples, and here are the resources that you can use. And that's, again, that's how I feel like we have the opportunity to make a much bigger difference that goes well beyond just the buildings that we design.
Melissa, do you think your clients are hungry to innovate? Are they I was having this conversation. I remember about I don't know, it must have been a decade ago. Well, I've been here 7 years. So it was longer ago than that. Maybe 13 years ago, nationally, we had an innovation cabinet that I staffed at when I was at Leading Age National, and we went to 3M in Minneapolis. That's where we had one of the meetings. And I was like, we were all talking about innovation. That's what we were all talking about. And then, the world changed, right? And here we are. And I wonder, where are your clients around changing, evolving business models, innovation? Because we've been so hunkered down.
Yes.
Like we have so many challenges around us.
And that is, I think, one of the hardest things that organizational leaders and community leaders are facing right now, is the ability to one, pull ourselves out of sort of the survival mode, and because we have lived in that, and to some degree we're still living in it, and that becomes it becomes the way you operate, and you're forced into it, but then you actually have to really force yourself out of it. And there's a process of being able to focus on the micro, the day-to-day, but also being able to pull out and focus on the macro. And I think that muscle has atrophied a little bit through the last few years for all of us. And it's something that we need to be really cognizant of. Here's what I see, Melissa. I see that people want to innovate. People want to create the future of aging services in their organizations and in their communities that are sustainable and desirable, and that meet the needs of older adults now and well into the future. The desire is not there. The desire is there.
Yep.
I think what the challenge is to overcome is the ability to sort of, again, flex from that micro day-to-day to the macro and the long range looking forward. I think another thing that is a barrier for our field is risk aversion and liability, frankly. It's such a complex business. There is such risk and liability. The desire is there. The how to do it is often what I think is really the roadblock for most of our clients.
Agreed. All right, one last question about the firm, and then we're going to
Mhm.
switch to back to you. So first, this is SFCS.
Yeah.
Is it an acronym? I only know you. I've only ever known you as SFCS.
I appreciate that question. It was an acronym. Let me
Right?
put it that way.
Yeah, I mean
So,
the brand is SFCS. I'm just wondering where it came from. I've never heard.
so over the 100 and, plus years that the firm has been in business, we were like a traditional architecture firm, so which are like law firms. They
Right.
always have the names of the principals or the partners. So we went through a period where that was the case, Eubanks and Caldwell, and so on and so forth. Eventually, because we've had multiple generations of owners and leaders in the firm, right? I mean, over 100 years, we've had 10 transitions across the firm or more. And so at one point we were Sherritt's, Franklin, Crawford, and Schaffner.
Okay.
Okay. Now that is a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
And at a point, those owners and those leaders were no longer with the firm. And in the life cycle of a firm, you get to a point where the firm is bigger than the person, than one or two or three or four people's last names. It's an entity unto itself. And we hit that point and we transitioned. I mean, we love legacy. We love our history, but we also love looking forward. And so our approach was, all right, we're gonna respect the history, but we're also going to depersonalize and set the firm up for 100 more years of transitions and different leaders and things like that. So we became SFCS, which is still a pretty tough set of acronyms, and letters to have next to each other. But that's who we've been now for several decades.
Well, the brand does work because I've never thought in all the years I've been working with you all, I've never thought to ask what the letter stood for until this very moment. So I guess it does work. So, I would never promote another conference in Virginia because it competes with our own, and I'm selfish like that. But I do attend and adore coming to your conference. So can we just talk about kind of the evolution of SFCS by design?
Absolutely. And as you know, we're always thrilled to have you. And we're really lucky that we, at this point in the history of our conference, we're planning our 39th conference right now, which will be held in early February. It's, as you know, putting on a conference, it's a year-round effort and focus. This started let's just kind of round it to 40 years ago, not quite there, but as an internal workshop. It was part of our effort to push ourselves to learn and to grow and really, push that expertise, that knowledge, that research. So it was an internal workshop where we got together and we talked about what we were seeing and thinking and doing and experiencing on projects and what we could do better and what was out there and what problems were there that we could solve and needed to solve. And then our clients started asking to come. And so for a period of time, it was sort of like an internal workshop with certain clients attending and collaboration. And over time, it sort of shifted and it became an external focused event that we host, generally draw between 200 and 250 attendees from across the country. Some are clients, some not our clients, a lot of professional colleagues and friends who also are huge contributors to the field that we all focus on. And we use it as our annual kind of mechanism and vehicle to address the challenges that our field is facing. And we use our research to share it at that. We host We sponsor a studio at Virginia Tech in honor of one of our former principals. And we actively use our By Design conference to pull people together, and that core value of collaboration and creativity and sharing knowledge and advancing knowledge and our research. That's what this conference is about. It's not a design conference, interestingly enough. It is a senior living thought leadership conference that's focused on the future of the field.
Well, it's also like coming home, I mean,
yes,
it's a lot of fun to go and see so many people. I mean, there's a lot of Virginians there.
There are, and we love having everybody.
So Melissa, when you think about aging services and the, so many myths that are out there about the field in which we work, what is one myth that you wish that you could debunk?
So, I mean, I think it's a lot of what I talked about even in the practice of architecture, that aging services is not exciting, that there's no innovation in the field. It's boring. I think that is in a way one of the missions that I have for our firm and in my personal life, is that there's so many opportunities there's to have a really important impact on our society. The field is ripe for innovation and improvement, and you have that opportunity to have that impact in an area that really is mission oriented and meaningful. It's not, technologies, it's cool, it's hip, it's innovative, it's creative. Well, in a lot of ways, you got to ask yourself, what's the bigger picture there? What difference am I making in the world? Well, you're making a real difference in the world and in society, and even down to, individual lives when you work in aging services. And I think just how rewarding it is. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's guaranteed employment. It's only going to grow.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What is one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
So, that's a tough question, and I've reflected on it. And it's interesting. I talk about it quite a bit with my soon to be 84-year-old mom, who is living with me right now. Oh, okay. And I went to school to be an architect and to create buildings, but our career, what our firm is about, it's so much more than buildings. You've got to understand business and operations and, delivery of medical care and financing and marketing. You've got to be able to think about the future. So, I didn't understand how big and complex this work is, and it truly takes decades to build that kind of knowledge. And actually, you've got to continue building it throughout your career. It's a lifelong learning experience, not only on architecture, but at a certain point in my career, it still is about buildings and design, but it's also much more about, what do our clients need? What are their challenges? Which sometimes a building is a part of. Oftentimes it's much bigger than that.
So when you're not working, where can we find you? What are you doing?
Well, and in our field, you work a lot. So I do work a lot. But, One of the things that I love to do is spend time with my family. Melissa, you and I both have in common that we are dog lovers. I have a menagerie of pets. I've got 4 dogs that I love to spend time with, along with my husband. The outdoors is a huge stress reliever for me. Whether it's gardening or hiking or just really enjoying kind of the nature. I mean, we live in a beautiful area, and taking time to stop and really appreciate that is something that I try to do. Again, spending time with my family, I've been incredibly lucky as the young child. I'm not young anymore, but I still am to my parents. My mom's 83. She'll be 84 in December. My dad is 88, and they are both still living. And so I spend as much time as I can with them. My father has vascular dementia, and so it's also been interesting in my life cycle and my career that one of the passions that I had was design for cognitive impairment. And that started for me in my mid-20s. And it's been something that I've spent my entire career with a specialty focus on, with research on. And then, now that it's actually come back around and it's really personal. That's also something that life teaches you lessons in ways that you never can expect.
Yeah. Well, I think you really hit on something that I do believe is unique to our field. I mean, I don't know what other fields have I worked in, right? Not many. But that really is it's so hard to separate the personal from the professional, with the work and the relationships and the
Yes.
stories, and there's something really lovely about that, and they reinforce it. And I think your story is a beautiful illustration of that, and I appreciate you sharing it with me and with our podcast listeners.
Well,
So
thank you.
thank you for being here today, Melissa, and thank you for all you and SFCS does for our members, the field, and particularly for Leading Age Virginia.
Oh, well, we are happy to. We so appreciate the partnership and the relationships and this opportunity just to talk to you in a different method. I do hope to see you and everyone listening in February at our By Design conference. We've got some great things planned, really exciting, great speakers, awesome theme. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to just leave that as a teaser, and more to come.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks, Melissa. To our latest episode.